And then I record audio separate.
Okay.
And yeah, I did take that out about spermidine. Okay. All right. And if you're ready, in 3, 2, oh, wait, it's Werner, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just don't want to mispronounce your name. Okay. Emily.
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. In 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have Dr. Emily Werner. She is a PhD, an RD, a CSSD, and she is in her 3rd season as the team dietitian for the Philadelphia 76ers of the NBA. She has also been working as nutrition affairs lead for Amazentis and Timeline Nutrition since February of 2022. She's a dietitian that is a certified specialist in sports dietetics and has over 7 years of experience working with athletes in different capacities, including individual consultation, research, academia, and the team sport setting. In addition to her master's in human nutrition, she holds a PhD in exercise physiology. Her expertise is in the assessment of sport nutrition knowledge and behavior, as well as the application of sport nutrition for health and performance. And today we are going to talk about the mighty mitochondria. I'm sure more and more people are hearing about this fancy word, but a very, very important function. And we're going to talk about the mitochondria as we age and something you might not have heard about. And this is called urolithin A. And so with that, welcome, Emily. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. No, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. So of course I'm going to ask you, like I ask every guest, what's your story? How did you get into this? And holy credentials, girl. You've done a lot.
I know my family gives me some flack calling my email signature alphabet soup. So I guess I have a very similar story to a lot of sport dietitians in that I was an athlete all my life. Grew up playing basketball since I was like 4 years old, and played a little bit into college as well. And when I was in college was when I really discovered my love for exercise physiology and the mechanisms behind athletics, really. And along that same line, I recognized that I never had any training in nutrition, which surprised me because of how interrelated those two things are, exercise and nutrition. So I had an opportunity to go do a master's degree under a phenomenal researcher named Stella Volpe, and she was doing nutrition and athletics research at Drexel University in Philadelphia. So I essentially followed her out there, did my master's in human nutrition, and along that was my coursework necessary to become a dietitian. And so completed that and then moved on to a PhD in exercise physiology. I always thought I was actually going to be a researcher. I thought I'd be locked in a lab the rest of my life, and I was totally cool with that, maybe teaching some classes at a university. I love to educate. And then when I was doing my PhD, I started working with the men's and women's basketball team at Michigan State, where I did my PhD. And I fell in love with the team setting, working with an interdisciplinary team with strength and conditioning and athletic training, and really being able to make an impact in athletes' lives by educating them on nutrition, and not just for performance, but for long-term health as well. And then the 76ers job opened up when I was finishing my PhD, and I applied and got it. And so here I am.
That is super cool. And I'm going to avoid making jokes and, teasing our rivals, because as you know, I'm a Toronto Raptors fan. If you can call, I'm a fake fan. I'm a fake fan. I am a fake fan, Emily. The facts are my husband and my son are huge fans. And so, they're the ones who brought out all the jokes. I'm like, I'll save them.
Tell them I said I'm sorry.
Okay. So I think it's a great place to start if we talk about what are the mitochondria,
Yeah.
because people who are not in the wellness space are probably just starting to hear about mitochondria,
Mhm.
whereas it's been talked about in the wellness space for a while now. So maybe talk about what they are.
Yeah. So from a 10,000 foot view, let's start there. The body, as we know, is made up of trillions upon trillions of cells. And within each of those cells are different organelles, as they're called, to kind of help every cell do its job. So think of it like a watch. There's a ton of different cogs and wheels and chains and all of that to make a watch function. So one of these organelles within the cell is called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are the site of what we call cellular respiration, which is really just a fancy term for energy production. So all of the ATP, the adenosine triphosphate that we produce, which is our energy currency, is made in the mitochondria. So that's why they're so important, because we want healthy, high functioning mitochondria to produce a lot of ATP that we need to do literally everything from the macro functions like moving hands, talking, all of that requires energy, to even the little stuff like everything happening within the body.
That's a great way to explain it, because I always just say our energy factory.
Yeah.
I make it really simple.
Most people know the term the powerhouse of the cell. And
Yes.
it's funny how that phrase has been twisted, because people think of that as like, oh, powerhouse, that means muscle growth. It's just all about muscle. Well, yes, it does involve muscle, but like powerhouse literally means the house in which the power is made.
Yeah. Yeah. So I personally have been paying attention to my own mitochondrial health over the last couple of years now. Now, why is it so important to not ignore our health of our mitochondria?
Well, like I said, with all of our energy being produced there, we want to make sure that our mitochondria are well functioning, and they actually have their own DNA to them. So there's mitochondrial DNA that's separate from our cellular DNA that, make up our phenotypes, so how we present to the world. And as we age and also as we experience stress, our mitochondria become dysfunctional. They start slowing down in their energy production. The mitochondrial DNA can become damaged. So it's kind of a hallmark of aging that mitochondria dysfunction starts presenting. And that can happen. A lot of research says it happens as early as 30.
I've heard that.
If you experience high stress even before that, it could happen at earlier ages. So, and stress could be not only kind of the mental stress that we experience, because that absolutely has an effect on the body, but exercise is a stressor. So,
Yes.
Exercise produces what we call reactive oxygen species, and too much buildup of those is going to damage the mitochondria as well. And so that's not to say exercise is bad in any way, but it's something that does have an effect on our mitochondria as we continue to age in life.
Okay, so I've heard the same thing, that it can start to decline as early as your 30s, and it is dependent. And stress
Mhm.
can be a major factor, and that's all types of stress.
Yep.
So this is why, and I guess with your sports background, if you're undergoing a lot of, let's say, mental stress, going to the gym at 8 o'clock to top up your stress may not be a great idea, right?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, like it's kind of like everything in balance. So how do we know? What are the signs that there's something going on with our mitochondria?
The first one, aside from the presentation of like specific disease states that can occur with mitochondrial dysfunction, those will have much more specific symptoms. In general, that decline in overall energy, I think, is kind of a big one that most people experience as they age. And for some, it presents worse than others. Over time, you realize, wow, I think I need 30 minutes more of sleep to feel normal. And then it becomes an hour more of sleep to feel normal. Well, and then my sleep cycle starts getting messy and I'm not sleeping as well. And you start to feel these effects that may not, it's not like a quick hit, you don't all of a sudden feel injured. You just over time feel less and less functional. And I think that's a big, a telltale sign of, let's look at the mitochondria.
That makes a lot of sense. Even, at my age, like I'm 53 years old, and you see where people just don't have the energy like they used to, or that, and let's just say here, that 3 o'clock dip in energy could be attributed to mitochondria, but it could also be attributed to many other things.
But that's what makes mitochondrial dysfunction so tricky, is because there's a ton of confounding factors. It could be a million different things. The way that I think of it is the mitochondria are really the baseline. Like, they're as far down cellular as you can get. So if you can address mitochondrial function and at least make sure you're doing what you can to optimize that, then you at least check that off the list of like, okay, it's probably not this issue. Let's look at other things.
Right. I like that. Now, because there's no real test, is there?
No.
Yet. There's nothing really good out there to say, yes, you have good, strong, powerful mitochondria, or no, you don't.
You can kind of draw certain conclusions based off of other blood work and stool tests, oxidative stress kind of testing, even aerobic capacity kind of treadmill testing. You can make some assumptions, but it's really, there's nothing specific. There's nothing that you can do to say, yep, you definitely have dysfunctional mitochondria. All you can do actually is attempt a treatment or some sort of intervention period where you're trying to optimize mitochondrial function and see if that works. You know what I mean? And then if it does work, then maybe you have some inkling of like, okay, maybe that's what was causing some or all of my issues. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it is, because I've come across that with a few questions from people who are like, well, how do I test it? How do I know? Right. And I guess one thing you can say is that if you don't have the energy levels that you did when you were 30 and you're around whatever age, 40, 50, then you can assume that it might have and it's not going to hurt you in most cases. Like, we're not giving medical advice here.
Correct.
So, speak with your own practitioner. I can give my disclaimer now and just say, we're just providing you with education. You need to take this to your own practitioner to see if any kind of supplementation is right for you, because we don't know your story. But here's a question. We were talking about stress and mitochondrial health, and I'm not sure if you know the answer. One of the things I always talk about is how we can't necessarily change our stress. We lead stressful lives. There are some things, lifestyle recommendations, that I always talk about. However, do you think that certain things, I'm just going to throw this out there, like ashwagandha or rhodiola, adaptogenic herbs, or cordyceps, or things like that, reishi mushroom, any of these things, can they help to mitigate the effect that stress can have on our mitochondria?
Theoretically, maybe. So the way that I approach any sort of, let's just talk about the word supplement for a second. Like, when we talk about supplements, it is something that should be supplemental to the diet. It's not meant to be something that completely replaces or is a one-all cure for something, right?
Yeah.
So for me, if I had a client, an athlete, whomever, come to me and say, I'm experiencing low energy, but I'm free of all disease states, what can I do? My first thought is going to be, let's assess your diet on a baseline level. Let's try to see, okay, are you getting enough calories in your day to meet your needs? From there, do you have any micronutrient deficiencies? So it's kind of like, I don't look at the tiniest little fix first. I start bigger, and I'm like, okay, are you hitting your macronutrient needs? Are you hitting your micronutrient needs? Are you exercising. How much are you exercising? Like, what does that kind of regimen look like? What does the rest of your life stress look like? And just try to see if there's little pieces in there and nuances that could explain why they're feeling the way they are.
Yeah.
After that point is when to have the supplement conversation of certain things, whether it be, okay, I feel like I don't sleep well. So, but I'm doing all of the sleep hygiene recommendations that the National Sleep Foundation has, so maybe on top of that, I try an ashwagandha, or I try a, another type of sleep remedy and see if that helps. So to bring it all back together, my first question is always going to be, what does your baseline diet look like? And are there gaps there that we can fill using whole food sources? And then on top of that, do we need to explore further options?
Yeah, I love that. Unfortunately, Emily, we, as you know, I'm sure we live in a world of quick fixes.
Quick fixes. I
Quick
know.
fixes. And really everything kind of begins with the food. And then we have to see, because then there, you could take genetics into play, and you could take so many other things into play that can affect how we're processing and assimilating all those nutrients, right? Because I love how you start with that, because that's always the foundation. Get the foundation straight and then work from there. I'm with you on that. Okay, so what diseases are tied to poor mitochondrial function?
All of them.
A lot.
Like so many. Yeah.
Yeah.
There really could be an argument made for mitochondrial dysfunction being associated, let's say correlation, not necessarily causation, of pretty much everything, from metabolic issues like diabetes to cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular dysfunction, all of that. Mitochondrial dysfunction really has its hand in just about everything.
Okay. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we talked a little bit about diet, eating a whole real foods diet to help improve mitochondrial function. What else? And exercise, movement is always critical, but the right kind of movement for us, right? What else? What else can help naturally improve our mitochondrial function?
So if we focus on, so really the two biggest realms, like if we put the buckets of diet and exercise, there's kind of nuances within each of those areas that are going to affect the mitochondria differently. So within diet, you could consider quality of the diet. So are you eating a variety of foods with lots of polyphenols and L-glutathione, high antioxidant foods that are going to improve mitochondrial function? And then there's another side of nutrient timing. So there's research that has shown intermittent fasting has a positive mitochondrial effect. And that could be the classic like 16-8 kind of intermittent fasting split, or it could be those people who, will fast for an entire day and feed for an entire day and kind of do a little bit more back and forth that way. But in general, the human body is not meant to be fed all the time, which is an unfortunate side effect of our Western diet culture, is constantly being accosted even by food in every way. So, and it's funny because saying that as a sport dietitian, when so many of my guys, I'm like, well, I want you eating every 2 hours because that's when your muscles are already going to start breaking down. And I'm trying to like find a balance between mitochondrial health and like weight gain or, weight maintenance, and these guys that are burning thousands upon thousands of calories a day. So it's a really tricky balance, but
for them
for sure. But in general, for the general population, like you and I do not need to be doing that.
Nope. And that I love that you talk about that, because for me, I know with my age category, it's women snacking. Right.
Yes.
And then I try and educate on the whole insulin and glucose response. And like, it's almost like you're wearing, like, cause a lot of people hear the word insulin resistance. I'm like, you're wearing it out. It's a hormone. And if you keep calling upon insulin constantly and you're also there's other factors, right? Like if you're a 50-year-old woman going through menopause, like so I'm with you. And I have a son that's an athlete. He plays varsity baseball
Mhm.
and he loses weight because he doesn't eat enough, Emily.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you there, but
No, you're good.
I wanted to make sure that we just said it's very individualized.
Yes, I was just going to say, you bring up a perfect point in that no two cases are the same. There's going to be similarities between similar groups. So the athlete group for one, and, middle-aged women for another, but you have to consider things on an individualized basis for
Totally.
sure.
Totally. And then the
Uh,
next, I think I probably interrupted you and now you lost your train of thought,
well, I
but
was just,
maybe
no, so
sleep,
that's
maybe
kind of I'm sorry.
sleep, maybe.
Sleep is definitely going to have an effect. I was going to talk about the exercise piece was,
Okay.
so we've covered how diet can affect the mitochondria. As far as exercise goes, whether you're doing primarily aerobic exercise, so that's more of like the endurance, running, cycling type exercise, as opposed to resistance training, weightlifting, those two forms of exercise are going to have different effects on the mitochondria. So whether it is increasing mitochondrial density, so increasing the number of mitochondria per cell, or whether it's increasing mitochondrial, that cellular respiration efficiency. So making the mitochondria you have already just produce more energy. You can kind of.
Oh, which does what? Tell me.
It's endurance exercise is going to increase that mitochondrial biogenesis, that mitochondrial density. So in general, though, it's really good to do both, right? To have some sort of endurance training and to also do some resistance training because of the different effects that both forms of exercise have, not only on the mitochondria, but on the body as a whole.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I focus a lot on weights.
Mm-hmm.
Like I work with a personal trainer and I have for almost 5 years. And, I'm like, please, God, don't give me any cardio today. But,
Well,
but
it's good for you. The thing is they're just two very different forms of exercise that have some similar effects, but primarily different effects on the body. Both are
okay.
great.
Okay. So I'm clear. One, if you're doing a lot of, say, cardio, you will be increasing the number of mitochondria.
Mitochondrial density, yes.
Okay.
So all the cells have like thousands to tens of thousands mitochondria per cell. So it's not like a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And then if you're doing weight training, you're increasing or you're helping the quality of the mitochondria. Does that make
Basically like power capacity. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yep.
I like that.
Yep. Definitely good to do both. So yeah, those are primarily the ways to affect mitochondrial function. But no matter what, you can't stop aging. You can just kind of slow down the effects or, inhibit the bad effects that are going to happen no matter what.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing.
All we're trying to do.
That's what I'm trying to do. Okay. So let's get into urolithin A. What is it?
It's metabolite. So alongside of the exercise and diet buckets that I talked about, those are two areas that have been well researched over the past 20, 30 years. We know those two things affect mitochondrial function. What was recently discovered in the past, I think it was about 15 years ago at this point, is this metabolite called urolithin A. And what it does is it induces this recycling process that your mitochondria go through. So if we back up to how we talked about mitochondria becoming dysfunctional over time, one way that the body has kind of this saving mechanism, like it's at all times, your body's just trying to survive, right? No matter what. So one way that our bodies have evolved in order to survive this decline in mitochondrial dysfunction is that we naturally recycle our mitochondria. So if one starts to become dysfunctional, it will begin this process called mitophagy, which is, if you've heard of autophagy, it's very similar. So if autophagy is cellular recycling on that whole cell level, mitophagy is mitochondrial recycling.
Oh, okay. Because we talk so much about autophagy.
Yep. So the mitochondria do the same thing. they recycle themselves. So basically they'll start to crumble into little, pieces in theory. And then those little pieces will combine with one another to create new mitochondria and just continue recycling themselves rather than going through a full kill off and reproduction, because that would take more energy to do. And your body wants to conserve energy.
So a lot of people, as you get older, you've got a lot of these bum mitochondria that are just kind of hanging around and not doing anything.
Exactly. So you build up, it's kind of like, a dishwasher that needs to be replaced. It's just, at first it functions great. It just washes everything and everything comes out pristine. And then over time, your dishes aren't coming out as clean as they used to. And
Great analogy.
And you keep going, and eventually your dishwasher is not going to clean any of your dishes and you need to fully replace it. Now, wouldn't it be easier if you knew that just a couple of parts of it were dysfunctional and you could just replace those couple of parts and it would work like brand new again, as opposed to completely tearing it out from under your cabinet and replacing it with a new one? So that's why our body does this mitophagy process, the recycling, because it conserves energy. So to bring it back to urolithin A, the reason this is so novel and groundbreaking is because urolithin A triggers that process. So intermittent fasting and exercise also trigger that mitophagy process. And that's how we talked about that mitochondrial biogenesis, increasing the density, all of that. Urolithin A does the same thing. So it's been the first metabolite that's been shown to have that effect on the mitochondria. So that's why it's like so groundbreaking, because before you had to do a couple of lifestyle things that not a lot of people are willing to do, but research on urolithin A has shown a similar mitochondrial effect to those two things.
Okay, that is brilliant. I love how you described all of that. So here's a question. We now know the difference between autophagy and mitophagy. So autophagy is taking the whole cell and doing that cleanup and clean out. Mitophagy is just dealing with those little mitochondria and just cleaning on a smaller level, on a cellular level, what's inside the cell. Okay, so if you're doing a lot of things, do you need to trigger both autophagy? Like, because I'm trying to think, like, technically speaking, wouldn't you be cleaning
double duty?
Yeah, like I just need to understand the body, how it works that way.
The short answer is I don't know.
Okay.
There hasn't really been, because urolithin A and the ability to trigger mitophagy in that way is so new, there hasn't yet been research on triggering both at the same time. I think we're working on that. And in my mind, I get what you're saying, because I'm like imagining a spinning wheel inside of a bigger spinning wheel.
Yeah. Totally.
Like recycling it within recycling. It sounds counterproductive in a way. The reason that the thing is if you trigger one and the other is not necessary, you are wasting energy, right? So if your cells are fine, but maybe your mitochondrial dysfunctional, like you're wasting energy recycling an entire cell and recycling, because I don't actually know what happens to the mitochondria within a cell during autophagy, but like your mitochondria are kind of always going through mitophagy. It's not necessarily a light switch on and off kind of process. So theoretically, you're just pushing them through mitophagy maybe before they need to, when they're still high functioning. And does that have an effect on their function? I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's really an interesting thing to think about, because you think, okay, well, first off, how do I know if the whole cell is dysfunctional,
right?
Or if it's just the mitochondria? And is it better to just do a little cleanup of those mitochondria and keep the cell, because there's other good stuff in there? That's just me kind of thinking, right?
I know, that's the thing. And that's, I think, where this kind of battle in research is like, what's really necessary. I mean, there's other organelles within a cell that have other necessary functions. So I think if there's some sort of condition that it means one organelle is dysfunctioning. That's not the mitochondria. It gets so nuanced that like, I don't really know. I leave that to the physicians to make that decision, I guess, at the end of the day, because everything has to be so individualized that if somebody just came to me and they're like, which do I choose, autophagy or mitophagy? I'm going to say, let's talk about what your story is, what you're currently dealing with. And maybe you try to fix one and see if that works, and you just leave the rest up to God. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, okay. So it's a process though. My
Yes.
understanding is both of them are autophagy and mitophagy. It's not like you start taking a pill and exercising and eating and doing all the things that we talked about, and then boom, it's activated. Or is it activated all the time? Or do you just want to optimize the activation of mitophagy, right?
That's a good question. So it's activated all the time and you just want to optimize it.
Okay.
So imagine the best analogy I have for mitophagy in general is like your phone, right? So let's say you get a phone in 2014 and it's the brand new model at that time. And no matter how well you take care of it, eventually that battery life can like starts to lessen. And even if you charge it back up, it dies quicker.
Yeah.
The mitochondria do the same thing. They are super high functioning for a time, but eventually they become so dysfunctional that they're unusable. And that's when they need to be recycled. It doesn't happen immediately. So in the same way that we talked about the supplementation, like you just mentioned, it's not like caffeine kicks where it's like all of a sudden you have more energy. It takes time for this process to be optimized, for the effects to be physically felt.
Okay, but we can agree that all the studies show that the whole process slows down as we age.
100%. Yeah.
Right. So that's something that is known and has been well studied.
Yes.
Okay. And that is despite having a good diet and exercise. I mean, there's some processes in the body, just like you were talking about that old iPhone. It's still working, but it's just not as efficient. I love that you use that as an analogy too. That's really good. Okay. So let's get into Mitopure. Because we have to talk about Mitopure, because isn't it like the only supplement out there
for urolithin A? Mitopure is urolithin A, and it is created by the scientists who discovered urolithin A. So we have, and by we, I mean Timeline Nutrition that owns Mitopure, which, as you mentioned, I'm a consultant for. We own the patent on urolithin A production. You can't patent a natural metabolite. So it's not the metabolite itself, it's the production of it. So Mitopure is the branded version of this urolithin A. It's the supplement for it. Because you can get urolithin A through natural food sources. The pomegranate. Yes. So it is a pomegranate derivative. And that's kind of how it was actually discovered, was a group of researchers actually related to involving the researcher who discovered resveratrol. They all got together and they're like, let's look into pomegranates. What phytonutrients within pomegranates make it this superfood that we know it to be? And so one of the nutrients they found was urolithin A. And they were like, okay, this is awesome. Let's just get people to eat more pomegranates. But the problem with that is the research showed when people ingest pomegranates, not only can most people not make that conversion into urolithin A, but even those who can make the conversion, it's 6 times less than one kind of targeted dose of Mitopure. So people would have to be drinking 6 glasses of pomegranate juice a day and have the right gut microbiome in order to get the benefits of just one kind of calibrated dose of Mitopure.
Yeah, I know that Timeline Nutrition has the Mitopure challenge, which I did. And I'm like, of course I did the challenge. And of course I'm not a producer, because that would just be too lucky. Right. Because it's not common to be a producer.
Correct. Yeah. It's only about 30% of people are a producer at all. And even within that percentage, it's a small percentage that are what we would call a high producer.
Okay, just to get back to this whole thing about, a higher concentration, you would have to I actually talk about this a lot, and I talk about it with my mom because my mom is she's all about eating the nutrient,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And so she's like, "Well, I'm putting turmeric in this or whatever." And I'm like, "But it's still not the same as taking a highly bioavailable dose of curcumin." Right? So it's kind of the same idea.
Yes. Yes, in a way. So, I agree with your mom in the sense that my philosophy on nutrition and my nutrition coaching is that it's a food first, but not food only kind of world.
Yes, yes.
And that's a phrase I stole from a researcher called named Graham Close. They came out with a great paper on just supplementation in general. Um, the thing is about whole foods is that the nutrients that exist within whole foods are calibrated in such a way and in conjunction with each other in such a way that our bodies are used to processing it. Like we were meant to eat whole foods. That's what
Mhm.
humans have always come up on. So I agree with you in terms of, we know from research that taking a calibrated dose of a supplement of curcumin in a pill is going to get more curcumin into our system than if we were to just spice our food with it.
Right.
But what happens after that? Like, does the curcumin from the pill act in the same way as it does when it's paired with the food that it's meant to be on? So it's kind of the same sense with Mitopure as well. That's why I love that one of the products we have is actually in a berry powder, because it comes with food or berry extract that also has L-glutathione in it, which is the precursor to urolithin A.
Yeah.
So having foods at the same time with the supplement that pairs well with it, I think is the best way to go 9 times out of 10. But you're not wrong in saying that you're going to get a much higher dose of something by taking the supplement than you are eating just the food itself.
Yeah. It's almost like you get a little more bang for your buck. So eat the food,
Yeah,
eat the whole real food. And then if you feel in discussion with your practitioner that you could use more, then add in the supplement.
correct.
So, okay. I'm trying to think. Okay. We talked about the Mitopure challenge. Oh, contraindications. Are there any? There aren't.
Aside, no, none of, so we have 4 human clinical trials published, none of which have had any adverse event from Mitopure.
Wow.
Yep.
So it's not like your little cell's going to go and explode from all this healthy mitochondria. That can't happen.
No, no. And I mean,
Okay.
I use this product with the athletes that I work with, most of
Yeah.
which take 1,000 milligrams a day. And if you think about an NBA athlete, they're already the top 1% of athletes who are already probably at some sort of a mitochondrial ceiling. And I will still use this with them, and there's no side effects, and they do feel better. So,
Not to mention they're not young. They're young. They're not
yeah,
our age.
I mean, yes, they're not middle-aged, no, but
No.
I mean, young is relative, because in the NBA, I have quite a team of older gentlemen.
Okay. Yeah. So there's no contraindications. You can't overdose on this in any of the studies, but it
We've
takes
only
time.
It does take time. And I'll clarify, we've done safety and efficacy studies up to
Yeah.
2,000 milligrams a day. We don't know of any sort of toxicity level past that point. Theoretically, there wouldn't be an issue, but I do want to make sure that people aren't just going out and taking 4,000 milligrams a day. And because not only we stopped at 2,000 because there was a plateau of benefit. So
Okay.
yeah, so there was no reason to go above that point. And we know that that dose is safe, but there's really a plateau of benefit around actually like the 1,000 mark.
Okay. So, and then you have to take this for about 3 months to really see the benefit, which would be the energy, the vitality, all of that, right?
So our clinical trial outcome markers have been at the 2-month mark, about 8
Okay.
weeks. And that's when we've seen the improvements in muscular strength and muscular endurance in both older adults, so like the 65 and up group, and then middle-aged adults, the 45 and up group. Anecdotally, I would say most people that I've spoken to, myself included, started feeling the benefits within 2 or 3 weeks. It's just that our clinical trial publications have different outcomes in a more structured way. So that's why the recommendation for anyone that wants to start trying Mitopure, we always say, give it 2 months, give it at least 2 months, maybe 3. So that way, you know that you've put the time in necessary to feel those benefits.
That's kind of like autophagy. They say, give it about 3 months to really kind of reach that peak. So here's another question. You're saying give it a couple months, and after those couple months, you're going to feel stronger. You're going to have better endurance, better energy.
Yep.
So even you'll see it at the gym if you go to the gym. Now, here's another question. I don't know if it has nothing to do with actually, building muscle though, does it?
Not directly, but I guess indirectly, because if you're optimizing your mitochondria and you have more energy to put into your workouts, I mean, indirectly, yes, it could result in improved muscle growth, but not in a way of like, it's not stimulating mTOR, or it's not
right
directly adding, because it's not an amino acid, it's not a protein, it's it's not doing anything like that, but it is improving mitochondrial function, which obviously has its own cascade of effects.
Okay. All right. I think that's, and this is kind of for anyone who wants to just kind of improve their performance, improve their energy levels. And I know what I was going to ask you. Is this the kind of thing that you can pulse in and out?
We don't. So I think yes, but we don't have any research on that right now. We're talking about doing studies that kind of look at, is it beneficial to come off and go back on? My own personal experience with that is that I really didn't feel too much of a difference when I came off of it for about 2 months, and then started utilizing it again. It's not like a caffeine where you feel a drop and then you're going to come back up. For me, what I think happened when I started taking Mitopure, let's say my energy level was like about here. And as I've told you before, I had thyroid issues. So my energy was trash.
Yeah.
I started taking Mitopure and it was like, I didn't need a nap anymore. Like I was feeling great. And I continued that way for like 8 months. And then during a period of just kind of testing some stuff with myself, I took myself off of all of my supplements for about 2 months. And I really think maybe my energy level came back down to like this. So it was one of those, when you get the mitochondria adapted to this improved energy production state, like from taking Mitopure, I think it would take much, much longer of a time period off of it in order to get back down to where you probably were before.
Okay, that makes sense. And the reason I asked that is because, people know, like I personally, I love my longevity supplements, and I love them because I don't really have issues with energy. So I guess that would be my next question. If you really don't have issues with energy, it's not to say it's not doing something. It's just that you'll feel it less than somebody who has issues.
Yeah. And most people that I've spoken to in my field who have trialed it, one of the biggest reports that they have is in their workouts. So they'll feel like they have not only more energy to put into their workouts, like kind of better endurance through it, but they recover better. So people were experiencing less soreness, less inflammation. And we actually have some preliminary data that might support that. We were just finishing up a study at the Australian Institute of Sport in elite athletes, and some of the still blinded data, but showed reductions in CRP levels, so C-reactive protein, which is inflammatory marker. So there really could be something there that we're hoping to be able to tell that story when the data are published in the coming months.
Oh, that's exciting. And the other thing too is like, what if you're recovering? What if you're recovering from surgery? What if you're recovering from an injury, right?
Same thing. So, I mean, like we said, the mitochondria are at the baseline of everything. And we also actually have published studies in immunity and in skin health with urolithin A, some osteoarthritic models in mice models. So some really interesting stuff that goes well beyond just energy and muscle health.
Oh, that's fascinating. All right, Emily, tell me where we can find more information.
TimelineNutrition.com. So that's going to be, there's a lot of really well-written blogs. That's super easy to understand. It's not, I know that I probably went a little sciencey today, but
No, it's perfect.
So yeah, TimelineNutrition.com. That's where everything is. I think it's a really easy website to navigate for sure.
That's so great. Thank you so much today for coming. It was such a pleasure chatting.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me.
Okay, I pressed stop on the audio. I think that went really well.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I think it was good because, my goal, hold on, let me just save this. I always like to save it immediately after.
So you don't forget.
Yeah, that's happened where I've had a scare because I save my